musician. Come, wait. As soon as you finish. As soon as you finish.
فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب صدق الله العظيم.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah. MashaAllah, Suleiman is a Hafiz Suleiman. He has memorized the whole Quran. And how old is he, MashaAllah? 10 years old and memorized the entire Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make him steadfast on the Quran, make him alim deen, make him follow the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the effort of his deen.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين، وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على خاتم النبيين حبيب رب العالمين المجتبى المصطفى محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وعلى من تبعهم بإحسان ودعا بدعوتهم إلى يوم الدين، وبعد. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا، وزدنا علما وعملا يقربنا إليك يا رب العالمين. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من أن أضل أو أضل، أزل أو أزل، أظلم أو أظلم، أجهل أو يجهل علي. رب يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين وبك نستعين. آمين. Honorable, respected brothers, elders, brothers and sisters, and dear children, we are very fortunate, honored to be part of this wonderful, noble event. And the reason being, it is related to the seerah of our beloved sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It is said, anything that is related to the beloved also becomes beloved in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So much so, scholars discussing the Qadr Sharif of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, the very surrounding of the Qadr of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is superior to all the other ones just because of its closeness to the blessed body of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we must thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and feel privileged to be joining and participating in events like this. The second important thing I want to mention at the outset of this discussion, dear brothers and sisters, as we know, in the month of Rabi'ul Awwal, oftentimes we hear the topics relating to the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rabi' al-Awwal, Rabi' in Arabic language, it means the spring season. And no doubt the, the, the blessed entry of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam into this earth really shaped the world once for all and really turned out to be the true spring season for the humanity at large. Therefore, one of the scholars said, the favors, the bounties, and the impact that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had on mankind is far-reaching. It is as far-reaching as you could see the horizon itself. You cannot encapsulate in your own vision the entire horizon. It's beyond the earth as it seems when you look at and when you look up. So this is who our Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam was. Time is always at the essence. The Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is an ocean. And it is an ocean that has no end to it. Therefore, in my humble estimation and understanding, if I am to use this metaphor, I could say that the Seerah, the biography of our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is a beautiful bouquet of flowers. And the reason I'm using this analogy and metaphor, if you think of flowers, they are the source of comfort and joy to the person. Right? This is why there is not, without an exception to any nation or any generation or to any gender, we all like to look at flowers. And why so? Because of the type of comfort that we find in that. Moreover, in this culture in particular, flowers are offered on both occasions. Am I right? On the occasions of joy and also on the occasion of sorrow. So in both cases, they serve as a comfort to the person. So studying the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Ya Latif, is much more than that for us as believers and to mankind in general. When we study the Seerah of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we find in that the enjoyment. It is a source of joy. It's a source of inspiration. It's a medium to find solutions to our problems. So it's a very holistic chapter. And therefore, there is no one that could come in any way closer to the Seerah of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam to rival with the depth and the details and the comprehension of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, as we find in the Seerah of Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So therefore, my brothers and sisters, the topic that I have been assigned to discuss, as you have heard, but if I am to modify the topic, and as a community, I want to talk about, at a larger scale, certain things that were very central to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, especially after he moved to Madinah al-Munawwarah. And we know for a fact that Islam, during the Meccan period, and Muslims as well, they were in a weaker state. Right? The true phase of flourishment, prosperity, and advancement for Muslims and also Islam began when Rasulullah moved from Mecca to Medina. It's a fact, we all acknowledge that. It was from that point onward that Islam emerged as a global religion. And Muslim community established itself very well and flourished and reached four corners of the world. It all happened after the relocation of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Mecca al-Mukarramah to Medina al-Munawwarah. So in other words, it was the hijrah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that marked not just the grand entry of the history of the world, but also the shaping of the world. So keeping this in mind and relating this to the reality of our life in this part of the world, we live in the West, right? And Western land is known as the land of immigrants and immigration, especially in particular Canada. Canada has the highest rate of immigration compared to any other country in the world. And it is also known as the land of opportunities. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he chose Medina al-Munawwara, of course it was by divine inspiration that he chose that location, but in that there was a message to look for the perfect and ideal place which could serve as an opportunity for you and your religion and your community to grow and flourish. That was the reason. If you look at the greater details of this. Therefore, it undoubtedly served the purpose. So given the fact we are either the immigrants or the second generation, but most of us are the immigrants of the first generation, and looking at this particular aspect of the Seerah of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I would like to share some reflections and some lessons as a reminder to myself first and foremost and all of us present here. We hope and pray that this discussion really sparks an interest in the Seerah of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to explore further and adorn our lives accordingly with the pearls of wisdom that we find in the Seerah. So the first thing that I want to say, my brothers and sisters, is this topic primarily for us Muslims as a community. How should we be in the West? Although you could apply what I'm going to say at an individual level as well, but primarily for us as a community, how can we move forward? What should be our vision? What should be our priorities? And what should be our strategies in this part of the world as a community? But community is also made up of individuals. So we need to have the right mindset to fit in this picture. And therefore, it is very important that we acknowledge this as a milestone in the Seerah, in the history of mankind and in the history of Islam itself. But one thing that I want to mention, sometimes we have this misconception, all the victory, the entire victory that was given to Prophet ﷺ during his lifetime, it was because he was the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is true, no doubt, but there were other things that contributed to the victory of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina al-Munawwara. Why was it not the case when he was in Mecca then? Because he was also a Prophet of Allah in Mecca as well, right? But we don't see the similar situation in Mecca. Things drastically changed when he moved to Medina. That means there was something different that Rasulullah did. Therefore, things became different for him and the community as well. Right? You're following my point. So therefore, it was not just because he was the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, therefore the victory was part and parcel of his mission. But along with that, what was the vision that he had, the strategies and the planning and the priorities, it was all together, all of this that paved the path of success and prosperity and flourishment for Islam and Muslim both in Medina al-Munawwara. So when we talk about this, looking at the vision of Prophet ﷺ, it was very holistic and it was very comprehensive. And examining this, we can very clearly say it was not just for Islam and Muslims, it was rather for the whole of mankind and also the society that they were part of. The society that became part of. And you will see as I will go through the points that I want to relate to you, I hope the time is enough for me to really share these important aspects of the Seerah of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in Medina al-Munawwara. Then you will see what was the vision that he had, the mindset, to bring the best to the people, to the Muslims, and to the society that he was part of. And my dear brothers and sisters, this is how we should be, wherever we may be. That's the point. But before I look at those important contributions and priorities of Rasulullah and strategies, we could divide this discussion into two phases. The first one is to develop and inculcate certain necessary characteristics in the minds of the Muslim, in the minds of Muslims and the Muslim community that were necessary for them to achieve the goal. That were necessary for them to achieve the goal that was set by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And therefore we find the following things that as the first phase of his grand plan in Medina al-Munawwara. for Islam and Muslim in the society at large. In that we find the first thing was to set the right priorities. To set the right priorities. And this is very, very important, because if we do not set the right priorities, because you are not speaking on behalf of an individual, remember that, as a community, as a religion, as a nation, Rasulullah ﷺ had this responsibility on his shoulder to look beyond his own personal preferences and priorities for the greater good of the society and the community and the Muslims and Islam. Therefore, setting the right priorities are very, very important for you to achieve and reach your goals. That is very, very important. And this is what we see. And for that, you need to study the society that you become part of and understand the challenges that are there in the society for you. Not for you as a person, for you as a community, for you as the member of the society. And that is what Rasulullah ﷺ did. So therefore, this is the number one thing that he did. Studying the society and the challenges out there. And the second thing is that now he understood the challenges, now he set the goals, but they were not short-term goals, rather long-term goals. And what do I mean by that? It is very important. You could meet and face some difficulties along the line and even defeat, but your goal is to reach there, not just here. Therefore, you could bear these short-term, challenges and also defeats, because you know that you have to go there and reach that level. So it will not stop you. If you are just looking here, and when you defeat, when you face the failure, at the first step of your long journey, then you will become very disappointed and you will stop. The Rasulullah was looking beyond. So therefore, this is what we can define as long-term goals. Long-term goals. Ya Latif. And the third important thing was, imagine they were coming from Makkah al-Mukarramah, and the situation in Makkah was very, very difficult. Right? Onslaught, persecution, marginalization, at all levels that you could imagine. Rasulullah went through so much and bore so much that you and I cannot even fully understand. Right? Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. She asked once Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, Ya Rasulullah, could you please tell me the most difficult day in your life? The day that you saw the world literally falling on you. What did he say? Oh Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha, it was the day of Ta'if for me. The day in Ta'if for me was the most difficult day in my life. So Makkah was literally, the period of Makkah was like every other day was a day of a Ta'if in many ways for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So therefore, coming from that very pessimistic, difficult situation, coming out of that, it is very difficult to infuse optimism in your own self, let alone in the community. Rasulullah said this as a priority, that I must infuse and promote optimism, because past is past, now we have to move forward. This optimism is very, very key and key ingredient for this success. And this is why, and he got this inspiration from Quran, of course. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayat while he was in Makkah al-Mukarramah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a very beautiful ayat. What did Allah say? Inna ma'al usri yusra. Inna ma'al usri yusra. So Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, yes, you are facing difficulties, but know that the phases of difficulties are temporary for you. And we know nothing is permanent in this dunya. So therefore, the difficulties are also not permanent. They will end sooner or later. So, inna ma'al usri yusra. With every difficulty, what follows is ease, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. So the ease for Islam and Muslims was the period in Makkah, in Medina al-Munawwarah. So optimism is another great important point that we learn. And last but not least, now sincere dedication and tireless work to achieve the set goals. And Rasulullah remained focused throughout his life on the goals that he set, but working tirelessly to achieve them. It is always something, subhanAllah, very important for us. We all talk great. We all have great ideas, right? You sit with anyone and talk to any individual, they will share with you wonderful ideas. but how sincerely that they are dedicated to those goals and ideals and ideas, you would find maybe 10% out of 100% people. This is why we are not moving forward. But Rasulullah ﷺ, along with the entire Muslim community, they were dedicated to those goals. Therefore, one Orientalist says something very amazing. He says, a man, of course he was not Muslim, he said, a man who ran for his life from Mecca to Medina in a short period of time, within 10 years period of time, the entire Arabian Peninsula was unitedly under his control. And he was undisputed leader of the entire Arabia within the 10 years of short time frame. How did this happen? Because of the dedication and hard work. So this is the first thing that Rasulullah ﷺ infused and developed in the minds of Sahaba. With that, he focused on certain things that I want to briefly talk about in these few moments, inshallah Aziz. What were the things that he focused? And of course, he started with the most important one and gradually moved down to the items in his agenda that he had. So the first thing, as we find in the books of ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أول ما قام به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بالمدينة بناء المسجد. The first and foremost thing that Rasulullah did, even before thinking of his own dwellings and houses, house to build for himself and for his family. And we all know it was the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a masjid. Right? And the question is, my dear brothers and sisters, why did he prioritize this as the number one thing? As the number one thing. Now you need to understand the situation that he had faced and where he was coming from, the religious persecution and not having the religious freedom. The scholars, they say that if people in Mecca were to give Rasulullah ﷺ the freedom of 3 times, to practice the religion and also to preserve the religion and to preach the religion, perhaps he would have not moved from Mecca to Medina. Because of not having these things available for him in Mecca, he moved to Medina. So what was his priority then? Is to preserve the deen. Is to preserve the deen. And subhanAllah, my dear brothers and sisters, as we are here in this part of the world, is that also our top priority, living in this part of the world? Something to think about. Our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam went through so much, and Sahaba went through so much because of this. Because of this. And for the sake of this. Therefore, he practically set this as a precedence for us to look up to and learn a serious lesson from this. And it is not just from this. If we read the Quran, we find this was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted from every community and every prophet of Allah to set as a precedence. And therefore we know the ayat, as it reads, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن أول بيت وضع للناس الذي ببكة مباركة. The first structure ever to be erected on the face of the earth was the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Was the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now, why did Rasulullah give so much importance to this? And like I said, my dear brothers and sisters, it plays masajid, our places of worship and religious centers, they play a very important, pivotal role in the preservation of deen. Why? Because you find comfort in these places. And you find the opportunity not just to connect yourself to the masjid, but also to connect yourself to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You just step out of this building. Do you feel the way you feel inside here? Not really the case. It's just a matter of this wall. Just step outside of this and experience your own feeling. Right? Step outside of this wall is completely a different world. And it is also an opportunity for you to learn the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? I mean, now, of course, we live in this virtual world where you can really have the speeches, the presentations all online, yet still they cannot, I can say this without a doubt, they cannot take place of your presence in the masjid and the khutbah in the masjid. Shattana baynahuma. There's a big difference between the two. Listen to a speech while being in your house and listen to the speech while being in the masjid and feel the impact on yourself, on your soul. Despite having these privileges, this cannot change that, cannot replace that. And therefore, Rasulullah ﷺ gave this importance to this. And the lesson that we learn from this, and therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, this is something perhaps many of us don't know. Medina was very, very small in the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, the city of Medina, right? The structure of masjid, including the courtyard, as vast as it is today, it pretty much encapsulates the entire Medina of the time of Rasulullah ﷺ. It was that small. Yet, do you know, and you will be surprised, in that very small town, during the lifetime of Rasulullah ﷺ, there were 9 masajid. How many? 9 masajid. And there is a riwayat in Abu Dawood, and Abu Dawood speaks on that. 9 masajid. I mean, the riwayat in Abu Dawood says, all of them were able to hear the adhan of Bilal radiallahu anhu, yet they would pray in different masajid because of the convenience and because of the XYZ reasons. I'm not saying that you build a new masjid next to another masjid. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to highlight is the important role that the masajid play in the life of the Muslim. So therefore, the life of a Muslim cannot be imagined in any land without having the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala present in that land. So the lesson for us is, like I said, is wherever we go, this should be our top priority. But alhamdulillah, in this part, in this society, our pioneers have done this job for us. Think of, ask those people when they moved in 60s and 50s, there was not really any masjid. And the concern that they had, they used to gather in people's houses for the gathering of salat and things like that, right? But alhamdulillah, now we have many centers and masajid around. So what is our responsibility now? To stay connected to these places. And not just us, keep our children also, get them involved and keep them connected to that. And I'm very pleased, and I say this, although we find these noises distracting to us, but I'm truly very happy that these children, they're playing in the masjid than to play somewhere else. Because as I said, the environment will impact them and will change them, inshallah. So we need to have this tolerance as well, right? Sometimes we become very intolerant to tolerate the children. So this is the number one thing. A lot could be said that I want to move forward because time is all limited. The second important thing that Rasulullah ﷺ did after this was the education. He prioritized education, as we know. How? Of course, he established the platform that is known as Sufa. We all are aware of that. What was Sufa, my dear brothers and sisters? Sufa was, in essence, in reality, was nothing but a residential school. I mean, when we hear this word residential in school, what pops up in our mind is the abuses that happen in this country. I'm not using this word in that context. Those do not misunderstand me. Because unfortunately, we misread things today. Not today, yesterday, I gave khutbah enrichment. So I said certain things that people have took out of context. So that's another problem that we have in our community. So what I'm trying to say is that, it was like boarding school. Not just school, a boarding school. Why? Because we believe in Islam, education is just education, but transformation of personality will truly take place when they are given the environment that is conducive to the education that they are getting. Right? You could be sharing the best of the teaching, but when the child goes home, it's like 90-degree different, 180-degree different environment that he is in or she is in. So what do we expect? And therefore, unfortunately, with children, they are growing up with this conflict with this torn identity. They think that when we are in the masjid, when we are at home, we should be Muslim. When we go outside, we should be very secular as other people are. So residential school or boarding school, And it is mentioned in the books of Seerah, on an average, there used to be 70 to 80 students there. 70 to 80 students. But the number would fluctuate. So this, and my dear brothers and sisters, when we think of education and the importance of education in Islam, I cannot emphasize enough, and we all know it. I just want to highlight 2 or 3 important things from the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for us to appreciate this. Number 1, we know the first revelation. It was all about education. Second thing, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned in the hadith, طلب العلم فريضة. طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلم. Seeking knowledge is an obligation on each and every Muslim, male or female. So this word fariḍa that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used, I want to highlight this in the modern context. You know, when we read the Charter of Human Rights by United Nations, they have rightfully acknowledged this, education has to be the right of every human being, right? When you read the Charter of Human Rights by United Nations, you find that education is the right of every human being, every child. What is the difference between haqq and fard? What is the difference between haqq and fard? And I hope that you understand this. So please bear with me. Haqq is something that oftentimes humans, they have defined as follows. For example, this phone is my phone, right? So I have the right to abuse it, or to properly use it, to break it, or to give it away to anyone. Do you have any right to object to this? Although you would think I'm a crazy person. But can you object? And can you do anything? No, because it's my phone. I can do whatever I like. But when you think of fard, it means it is divinely described. It is divinely prescribed. That means you don't even have the right to intervene in that. So in other words, if a person chooses to remain illiterate in the religion, he will be forced to education. You see, so when the word that they have used is like right, which is haqq. And what we use, what Rasul uses is fard. That means even if people choose to remain illiterate, Islam will not allow that. And therefore you will be surprised during the time of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, as Islam was expanding its territories to far and wide, prisoners of war, when they would be brought to Medina al-Munawwara, it's something very mind-boggling. They, as they would be in the cells and bars, behind the bars and in the prisons, one of the things they would be forced to do is to learn, to engage in the educational activities. Subhanallah al-Azim. And some of the great muhaddiseen, they came out actually as the great muhaddiseen after they were the prisoners of war in the beginning phases of their life in those cells, and they started learning, and then they became later great scholars. So this is the hadith of Rasulullah. We should understand this hadith in this context. So Islam has taken the concept of education to the highest level possible. It did not leave in the hands of individuals to choose and decide whether you like it or not. Because children, they don't like to go to school oftentimes, right? So the other thing that I want to highlight, this also further endorses the importance of education, is that in the Battle of Badr, we know Muslims were victorious, and they had 70 war prisoners. And this was just right after the second year after the hijrah of Rasulullah to Medina al-Munawwara. They were in the beginning phases of the settlement in this new land, economically very poor and broken down. And they are struggling to survive because they're still new in this new land. And we all have gone through this phase somehow in our life, right? In this part of the world. A struggling phase when you are new in a different country. But look at the vision of Prophet ﷺ. As a community, he thought what would be in a long term better. So there were certain war prisoners, captives, who were educated, learned yani. So Rasulullah ﷺ, instead of demanding them a certain ransom, a monetary ransom, the ransom he set for them was that they would teach 10 Muslim children. What would they teach? Would they teach Quran? Would they teach something religious? Think about the vision of Rasulullah. Think about it. They would teach, these individuals would teach the Muslim children how to read and write. How to read and write. And this was the ransom. This was the ransom. Though Muslim community was in dire need of financial assistance at this phase of their life. But Rasulullah sacrificed and compromised for the sake of the greater good of the Muslim children in the society. But my dear brothers and sisters, do we have the similar mindset and priority? And I'm sorry to say this, many of our parents, when we ask, I know this is another issue, but when we say to them, why don't you send your children to Muslim school? They have different excuses. One say, financially they are too expensive. But we need to, nothing is impossible to manage if you have right mindset and right priorities. Because you are sacrificing the future of your child if you don't set them on the right course of life from the very start. So this is very important that we learn. And therefore, when we think of the education in Islam, of course, you can study anything that is beneficial, but you have to prioritize religion first. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Iqra, read, but read in the name of your Lord. And connect everything back to your Creator. So the three lessons that we learn, number one is to prioritizing religious education for ourselves and also for our children. Why? Because this education plays a very important role in the preservation of deen in the life of our children. Number two, as we are immigrants in this part of the world, minority, we need to also produce experts in every field. We need to produce experts in every field. If you really study the seerah of Rasulullah, like again, subhanAllah, like I said, this is why I said the seerah of Rasulullah is like a beautiful flower. You will be amazed by the approaches of Rasulullah, the pragmatism and priorities that he had. One of the things that Rasulullah did during his lifetime, he sent two Sahaba radiallahu anhu was meant to a far off land, saying, you go and learn the technique, like you could say like technology, how to develop the modern weapons to defend yourself. Back in those days it was engineering. Right? So Rasulullah sent. So they were sent to a different land to learn the technique. So we need the experts in each and every faculty, in every walk of life, so that our community could grow stronger. Not just in religious sense, also in a social sense, political sense, and technological sense. So we need experts, and for that, of course, we need to develop the mindset of our children that they should really choose the fields that are very necessary for not just to make money, but also, more importantly, for them to benefit Islam and Muslim in this part of the world. And the third thing that we learn is that, as Rasulullah said, the precedents, we must promote the highest literacy rate in the Muslim community. Right? And that was the case in the golden age of Islam. But now look at the Muslim nations and look at the literacy rate in the Muslim world. It is no longer the same. So these are the lessons that we learned from the second priority of Rasulullah. And the third one is the inter-community relations. What do I mean by this? It's called mu'afat. It's like a brotherhood between Muslims, among Muslim community. We know that Muhajirun, when they migrated from Makkah al-Mukarramah to Madinah al-Munawwara, Rasulullah established this pact between two Sahaba, preparing them with, one was Muhajir, one would be an Ansar. What was the goal behind this? That is very important for us to understand. Apparently this was to help them settle in the new land and also to easily integrate in the society without being a burden on the society. This is how we understand it. But the greater goal that Rasulullah had with this type of pairing was this. This is something amazing, my brothers and sisters, for us to appreciate. It was actually to make all Muslims as one large family. Members of the large family. Why? Because Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. if you are to welcome someone in your house and you are to share each and everything with the person, that means you are making the person feel as he or she is part of your family, right? And therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised this type of sacrifice that Sahaba made in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hashr, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والذين تبوأوا الدار والإيمان من قبلهم يحبون من هاجر إليهم ولا يجدون في صدورهم حرجا مما أوتوا ويؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة. History has failed to produce an example like this. They would prefer them over their own needs, prefer them over the strangers from somewhere else, but now they become part of your society. So what was the benefit of that? It put an end to all racial discrimination and racial tensions. And unfortunately, our community is also has these diseases, right? So this was the benefit of that, and they all became the members of a large family. So the lesson that we can learn from this, my dear brothers and sisters, is that those of us who have come to this part of the world earlier should facilitate life for those who are the newcomers in Islam. Right? Especially now, the massive waves of migration. Muslims are coming from all corners of the world. Whatever you can, do so in the imitation of this sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And inshallah you will get the ajr as the Sahaba rizwanullahi got the ajr, somewhat similar to that, if not the same, because of your niyyah. Ya Latif. And the second thing that we need to learn from this is that, my dear brothers and sisters, we all love and dream about the unity in Muslim community, right? We all talk about it, but also suffer from the lack of the community, unity in the community, right? So we need to diagnose the root cause of this. There are multiple reasons, and Rasulullah solved all of that with this. So racial and all those ones, we have seen how Rasulullah integrated them very well as they became part of one family. But there are also one of the reasons that differences, right? So in Islam, cultural and all those differences, those things do not matter much. But opinions and religious differences, even there is a room to tolerate that. There is a room for. Therefore, the spirit of tolerance has to be present, and openness has to be there. Openness has to be there in order for you to make or facilitate the process of unity in the community. And that is very, very important. And I will give you an example from the life of Sahaba rizwanullahi alayhim, how they tolerated each other. How they tolerated each other despite, the differences among themselves on the religious ground. Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, during the time of his khilafah, we know when somebody is to travel, so they are to shorten the prayer, right? This is the religious rule, hukm, shara'i. So Uthman radiallahu anhu, when he would go for Hajj towards the latter part of his life, in Mina, instead of praying 2 rakat, he would pray 4 rakat. Instead of praying 2 rakat, he would pray 4 rakat, and Dhuhr and Asr and Isha, like that. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was known as Afqahu Sahaba, the Sahabi who had got a big share of the knowledge of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Sahabi al-Jaleel, he would differ with him on this, on a religious ground, of course, and his position was very strong and also very valid. He would not agree with him. He would say, I, in my lifetime, prayed with Rasulullah in Mina always 2 rakat. And also behind Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, I prayed 2 rakat. Behind Umar radiallahu anhu, I prayed 2 rakat. And in the beginning phase of the life of Uthman radiallahu anhu was the same, but it changed later on. It's altogether a different discussion. I don't want to get into that. But the point I'm trying to make is on the concept of unity in the diversity. This is what I want to highlight. Having this serious, strong difference of opinion with Uthman radiallahu anhu, when the time for salat came, he joined the congregation to pray 4 rakat behind Uthman radiallahu anhu. He joined the congregation to pray 4 rakat behind Uthman radiallahu anhu, though he did not see that as correct position. Subhanallah. And when somebody asked him, عِبْتَ عَلَى عُثْمَانَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ وَصَلَّيْتَ خَلْفَهُ. So the Sahaba and those who knew his position, they said, you criticized him for his position, now you prayed behind him? Right? What did he say? This is something to be written in golden words. He said, نعم, لأن الخلاف شر, he said. The reason I did this because I have my own position. But looking at the greater good, I'm part of the community and part of the congregation now. So to become the odd apple, as an odd example, in the congregation, to create division, this is what is al-khilaf sharrun, to create a division is an evil thing to do. Yes, I have my own position, but I have to put aside when it comes to the greater good of the society and community and congregation. Do we have this spirit of tolerance, my dear brothers and sisters? Right? So this is what we learned from this example. So today, sectarianism is on the rise in the Muslim Ummah, especially in this part of the world, because Muslims are from all over the world, right here. We are labeling each other mubtadir, mushrik, and kafir, all of that, as if we have become the custodian of paradise. We have been given this responsibility to choose who to send Jannah and who to send Jahannam. We need to learn from this example. So therefore, one of the scholars said, Shaykh Muhammad Zuhri rahimahullah ta'ala, in his tafsir, he said, looking at the divisions in Muslim community, he said, my heart bleeds. Wallahi, he says, we Muslims have so much in common to unite us than the differences to divide us. But we are so focused on the differences that we don't see the commonalities that is to unite us. And remember, victory is always with unity. Victory is always with unity, and defeat is always with disunity. So this is another thing Rasulullah did. And the fourth one is, this is something that many of us perhaps are not aware of. SubhanAllah, this again shows, marvels and amazes our minds. Studying the seerah of Rasulullah from this angle. What is that? Economic independence for the Muslim community and the stability for them. What is it? Economic independence and the stability for the Muslim community. Financial stability. Again, realizing that two things I want to mention in this regard. Number one, my dear brothers and sisters, economic strength, financial growth and strength and stability is seen as a backbone for any nation to prosper. And Rasulullah ﷺ recognized it from day one when he moved to Madinah al-Munawwarah, from day one. And the second thing what Rasulullah ﷺ did as a result of that is that, market, the role and the importance of trade market in any society, it is very, very important. Why? Because market, trade is the source of the revenue. The greatest GDP any community gets, any society gets through the trade. In any country, right? Like 70 to 80% comes from that. And Rasulullah back in those days recognized that. So because it is not that one, also it is, it is also this medium to fulfill all of your needs. Because you get all of your things, whatever you need, your essentials of life in the market. So Rasulullah, after he moved to Madinah al-Munawwarah, he studied the markets that were in Madinah al-Munawwarah. And he realized, by and large, that Jews of Medina, especially Banu Qaynuqa, there were different tribes in Medina, especially in particular this tribe, they were the markets of Medina were in the control of this tribe, Jewish community. And as a result of that, there was usually rampant and exploitation. They would not easily allow the newcomers and outsiders to trade in the market. So these types of abuses were common, deception, etc. SubhanAllah. And Muhajirun in Mecca, because the landscape of Mecca, if you have been there, it's very rugged and barren land. Right? But when you think of Ansar, people in Medina, it is relatively agricultural land. So Ansar were in this field, and the Sahaba from Mecca, they were in trade. So they wanted to do business. And Rasulullah noticed the struggle that they have in these markets. So what did Rasulullah do? SubhanAllah, he examined, he surveyed all of these markets, and then he's, in the Gharb al-Masjid al-Nabawi, in the backside of Masjid al-Nabawi, Rasulullah chose a spot. As he chose a spot, and he designated that spot and said, Hada suqukum, from now onward, this will be your market. He established, in other words, a new market for Muslims. La yuntaqasanna wa la yughlabanna alayhi al-kharaj. He said, this will remain always your market, and there will be no duty levied on it. In other words, the exploitation that are taking place in other markets, you will be free from that. It will be a market that will represent and idealize the Islamic teachings, free from all kinds of deceptions and exploitations. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself would monitor the economic activities. And it was not allowed, subhanAllah, this is something very important, my dear brothers and sisters. It was not allowed for anyone to trade in the market unless until he has studied fiqh al-buyur. Unless until he has studied the science of trade in Islam, the business ethics in Islam. This is why it is mentioned in the books of Seerah, especially during the time of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He said, لا يبيع أحد في سوقنا إلا من تفقه البيع. We will not allow anyone to trade in our market unless they have studied fiqh al-buyur. This was a condition. And as a result, and one of the reasons that Rasulullah did this, to show to the world at large, to these people, that fair trade, the concept of fair trade and free market in Islam, the concept of free marketing in Islam. Today they talk about the concept of free marketing in this world, right? But Rasulullah back in those days promoted this, the concept of free market. You're free. There is no restrictions and there is no conditions applied to you in this regard. Rasulullah said one time Sahaba came, Ya Rasulullah, should you define and set the prices for the market? He said, Da'uha. He said, leave that, the market to remain open in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yarzuqu ba'dhum ba'd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow the situation to get to this level that the market itself will define its prices. So this is the teaching in Islam. So as a result of that, in a very short period of time, subhanAllah, the society in Medina saw the eradication of poverty at all. If you study the seerah of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, radiallahu anhu, you find that there would not be even a single person. There would not be a single person. They would carry the zakat money. They would carry zakat money in their bags, go door to door asking, do you qualify to take my zakat? They would say, no. I have my own money. I'm struggling to give to someone. And they would have to transport money to somewhere else. They sent to the newly conquered territories back in those days. SubhanAllah. All of this happened because of this vision of our Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And right priorities and sincere struggle and sincere strive and efforts to achieve the goals. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened the doors of dunya for them. So what we learn from this, my dear brothers and sisters, is that as a minority in this country, we should explore as a community the options that would bring economic prosperity to our community in this society. Whether it is business ventures, trade, whatever it may be. But I want to mention two things here. One thing is that whenever we engage in the trade, we must make sure that our trade applies all these Islamic business ethics in that, so that we could show something different to the society around us. Right? For example, the customer service. For example, the markup of profit. Sometimes we see, unfortunately, is so high that people make the markup of profit. They buy something that's in $2, they are selling in $25. So things like this, there are exploitations also seen as such. Right? So this is one thing that we should do. And the second thing is that our teachers used to say that Muslims, especially living in the Western world, should do as much as possible to support their own Muslim businesses. Support their own Muslim businesses. So long as these businesses are reasonable and running under the religious dictates, of course. Why? And it was something, subhanAllah, amazing to me when I heard that from my teacher. The reason being, if you do not support them, who else will support them? If you do not support them, who else will support them? And second, the more important than this is that he said, Allah Ta'ala, the benefit of that eventually will come back to the Muslim community at large. How? For example, if you promote one's business, which is halal or Sharia compliant business, so this business, mashallah, flourishes, for example. Now this person gets extra revenue. What will he do? He will pay zakat. Who will benefit from the zakat? Muslims, right? Muslims will benefit from that. So we should do whatever it takes, as much as possible, to support our own Muslim businesses. Unfortunately, we become competitors with them and try to demonize their business, put down the business. Time doesn't permit, allow me to share the examples. You'll be surprised. I will just give you one quick example. And this was the case in Syria. SubhanAllah. One person went to one store. One person went to a store to buy something. And then when he bargained with the shopkeeper, the item he wanted to buy, everything was agreed upon. Now the seller said, "Are you sure you want to get this?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, if you want to get this, go to that store and get it from there. Go to that store and get the same thing with the same price from that individual." And this man said, you wasted my time. I bargained with you and I chose this, and now you're sending me to third person, somebody else. And he said, "Please go there." And they said, "I will not go until you tell me the reason." So when he insisted, this was, subhanAllah, the mindset of Muslims back in those days. Right? Thinking of others. يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ, as Allah says. Preferring others' need over yourself. He said, subhanAllah, he said, "The reason I'm sending you to his store, alhamdulillah, I made enough business today. But my brother did not make enough business today, so I want you to give him some business. I want you to give him some business." Allah. This is why we don't believe traditionally this competition in the trade and market. This is why traditionally, if you go to Muslim countries, you will see all these shops, clothes, shoes, they will be all next to each other. Next to each other, right? Because it is Allah who decides that. So this is the important thing that we learn from this. And now the next point that I wanted, the two things that I will end, inshallah, with this. Development of the society, the city, development of the city, Madinah al-Munawwarah. What do I mean by this? There is a beautiful Arabic proverb. It says, "Al-mu'minu kal-matar. Al-mu'minu kal-matar aynama waqa'a nafa'a." The example of a believer is like a rain. It's like a rain. What does the rain do? Wherever it falls, it is a source of life and rejuvenation. It is for a source of benefit. So this proverb defines our characteristic. This is how we should be. Any society we become part of. Not just becoming selfish and self-centered. So Rasulullah ﷺ, when he moved, to Madinah al-Munawwarah, Medina before the hijrah of Prophet ﷺ, in its landscape, environment was very different. It was the most polluted land, according to Aisha radiallahu anha. The most polluted land. It was the land of sickness, if I'm to use these words. And the air quality was very, very low. And the land was pretty much like barren land, not very green. And Aisha radiallahu, it is in Bukhari, Sahih Bukhari, Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, "Qadimna al-Madina," when we arrived in Medina, وَهِيَ أَوْبَرُ الْأَرْضِ وَهِيَ أَوْبَرُ أَرْضِ اللَّهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى. This land was the most polluted land on earth. As a result of that, Sahaba, they became sick. They all became sick. So they did not like this place. So Rasulullah ﷺ did three things. Rasulullah did three things. Number one, the spiritual remedy. He comforted them and he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Sahaba, there's one, and scholars of hadith, they say, because of two reasons. Because of this dua and because of the blessed body of Rasulullah being buried in Medina al-Munawwara, Medina is superior to Makkah al-Mukarram. What is the dua? Prophet ﷺ made this dua. Allahumma habbib ilayna al-Madina kama habbabta ilayna al-Makkah wa akthara wa ashadda min. Oh Allah, make this land, this city, beloved to us. Because he said, ashadda wa akthara min, he said. As you made Medina, Makkah al-Mukarramah very dear to us, make Medina not saying even more than that beloved to us. That's what Rasulullah made dua. And next to it, what he did, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he encouraged Sahaba rizwanullahi alayhim ajma'in to clean the city and to cultivate the land. You'll find a hadith in Bukhari, these hadiths to be understood in this context. So Rasulullah encouraged Sahaba rizwanullahi alayhim ajma'in to cultivate the land, and he said, whoever would cultivate any barren, dead land, it will become yours, and you will own it. Of course, if there is no one to own the open lands. So فَهِيَ لَهُ. So it was an encouragement to Sahaba rizwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, they started doing that. And the third thing what Rasulullah did, he encouraged also Sahaba rizwanullahi alayhim ajma'in to dig wells. And there's a hadith that we find in Sahih al-Targhib, Imam Allama Albani rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, "Man hafara bi'ra ma'in." Whoever would dig a well, he said, even if a jinn or a human being or a bird to get any drop of water from that, it will be a sadaqah jariyah for him and a source of ajr for the person on the day of judgment. This is how they were eager to earn ajr of Allah, ajr from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what they did, they started digging the well. As a result of that, the scholars they have mentioned, there were more than 50 wells in that small city of Medina al-Munawwara. So what these things did, eventually they turned the city of Medina as green and provided very fresh, clean water, right? And a better quality, better air quality as well, because the trees will be the source of carbon dioxide, right? So this is the thing. These are the things Rasulullah did. So on this note, what I want to say, my dear brothers, for us as a lesson, that these teachings teach us that we should be the people, the community who take care of their surroundings and the environment. Especially in light of this global, crisis of environment, we must play a pivotal role. We should join others on common projects. And I know for a fact I've been part of some of the projects with Christians, and that to restore the ecological system and the restoration of the forest and greenery, etc., etc. The erosion of the soil. There are many projects, mashallah, these people are working on. We should join them, because this is also the sunnah that we learn from the seerah of Rasulullah. And one more thing I want to highlight is that we, unfortunately, Muslim neighborhood, wherever we live in big concentration, I'm really sorry to say this. When you visit these neighborhoods, you'll find they're very poorly maintained, not clean. There is no greenery even properly, not very well maintained. But when you go to the Canadian neighborhood, it's completely other. You are very impressed. You are very impressed with that. So perhaps, of course, the city has its role to play. I'm not saying that, but part of the blame goes to us also, right? So we should be other way around in this regard. And last thing I want to say is that interfaith relationship and da'wah and tabligh. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recognizing the challenges, because where they came from, being just and this is what Mawlana Yusuf Sahib said, our relationship with non-Muslims. I gave you the holistic approach, but this was the part of this whole discussion. So Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recognized the challenges. Number one, his own experience in Makkah al-Mukarramah. Number two, now moving in this new place. And wallahi, if I am to say this, I would be correct. We are in this country for 5% maximum, right? Percentage-wise. And Sahaba Rizwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, when they moved to Medina to Munawwara, their percentage was very much the similar. Very much the similar. They were in minority. So Rasulullah recognized we are surrounded by different people of different religions and cultures. We cannot live in isolation. We cannot afford to live in isolation. We must integrate. We must integrate in part of the society. And we must be politically involved. And we must be politically strong. Therefore, subhanAllah al-Azim, my dear brothers, unprecedented in the history of religions before Rasulullah, what he did. And I'm not exaggerating this. Study this, and you will find this, and you will agree with me. This was something unprecedented in the history of mankind before Rasulullah, what he did in this. This is why some of the scholars, like Dr. Hamidullah rahimahullah, this was the first ever developed constitution, if we were to call this as a constitution of a society, a documented one. So Rasulullah came up, promulgated, and developed a constitution known as Misaq al-Medina, defining every society, every community's role and their freedoms and their rights. But we will all work under this one common code. And this will give freedom to everyone to practice their religion and also other freedoms as well. But we will be united when it comes to our common concerns and goals. We will fight as one united hand. SubhanAllah. That is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. And no wonder because of this, and the reason the Rasulullah did this so that Muslims could have this freedom to practice their religion, and also the freedom to preach their religion, and also to have this freedom, the freedom to have peaceful preaching in that land, which they were not given in Makkah al-Mukarramah, right? So, on this note, what I want to say, my dear brothers and sisters, as Islamophobia is on the rise, so we must recognize this particular teaching of Rasulullah and take it very seriously. And in order for us to do this, what we need is that we need political involvement. We need to work with other communities on common goals and concerns, with Christians and Jews and people of other faith, for example, on social justice. We should partner with them. And likewise, global climate crisis, and the other issue like LGBTQ community, gender role, etc. So we should partner with them because at the end of the day, it is going to benefit us. We should not think they are non-Muslims, so we cannot work with them. Anything that can unite us on common goals, we should go for it. As Quran says, "Ta'alaw ila kalimatin sawa." Come to a common word, right? And da'wah and tabligh, this is very important, my brothers and sisters. I leave you with this point. We shoulder a heavy responsibility in this part of the world. We should not think, we must stop thinking that, I am here for economic gain or for better career or higher education. Yes, these things have brought us here, this part of the world, but give the good reason to your presence in this part of the world. And that is that you become an ambassador of your faith in this land, an ambassador of your religion. Why? Because it is through this you will be able to change the minds of people who demonize the religion, who marginalize Muslims, etc. Because media is doing its own damage. This is why we need to recognize, and therefore we need to, as a community level, have open houses inviting others to learn Islam. At an individual level, at your workplace and in your neighborhood, through your beautiful character and beautiful teachings of Islam and preaching, win their hearts to Islam. And remember, my brothers and sisters, we in this part of the world, as becoming the ambassadors of Islam, we must show to these people that we are not the community who are here always to take, but rather we are here to give something to you. Give something to you. And wallahi, Shaykh Abu Hassan Ali rahimahullah that said in Cambridge, in London, addressing Muslims, he said, you must have this mindset. And he said, wallahi, what you can give to these people here, no one else can give. And that is the ni'mat of Islam. It is only you who have that. But provided you take that seriously. So therefore, I hope and pray, I apologize for taking so much time, but I hope and pray what I have shared with you, that we benefit from this. And we shape and transform our mindset and our life accordingly, so that we as a community could grow and flourish. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide one and all to act what has been said. Jazakumullahu khairan wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت ونستغفرك ونتوب اليك سبحان ربك رب العزه عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Humble request to the brothers who have not parked the cars properly, please park your cars properly.